Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect. Bryant Novick stared at the lines of code on his screen, eyes burning from 18 straight hours of work. His revolutionary blockchain protocol, nicknamed Prometheus, was finally taking shape after 3 years of relentless development. At 38, he was betting everything on this technology that could decentralize the entire financial system while making transactions untraceable. "Daddy, you promised." The voice of his 9-year-old daughter Abby pulled him from his digital trance. She stood in the doorway of his home office, clutching her science project materials. Bryant glanced at his watch, 11:20 p.m. He'd completely forgotten about helping with her volcano. "I'm so sorry, Pumpkin." He rubbed his bloodshot eyes. "Let me save this, and I'll help you right now." "Mom already did it," Abby mumbled, disappointed. "She said not to bother you because you're too busy making money that doesn't exist." The comment stung. Meredith, his wife of 12 years, had grown increasingly bitter about his work. She'd married him when he was climbing the corporate ladder at Silverstream Technologies with a comfortable 6-figure salary. His decision 3 years ago to quit and pursue his blockchain vision had been a constant source of tension. "Is your mother still awake?" Brian asked. "She went out with her friends from the country club again." Abby looked down. She said she needed adult conversation. Bryant felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. These girls' nights had become more frequent lately. Last week, he'd found a receipt for a $300 dinner at Oriole in her purse. Far more extravagant than a casual night out. "Come here," he said, opening his arms. Abby rushed into them. "I promise I'm going to make this all worth it. One day very soon, people will understand what I've been building." Later that night, Bryant heard Meredith stumble in around 2 a.m., smelling of expensive whiskey and wearing a dress he didn't recognize. When she slipped into bed, he pretended to be asleep, too exhausted for another argument. The next morning, over coffee, Bryant tried to bridge the growing gap between them. "I made a breakthrough yesterday," he said. "The protocol's alpha test worked perfectly. We're months ahead of schedule." Meredith looked up from her phone with practiced disinterest. At 36, she still turned heads with her polished beauty, maintained through rigorous fitness regimens and cosmetic treatments Bryant could barely afford. "That's nice," she said flatly. "Did you remember we have the Sandersons charity gala tomorrow night?" "I can't go," Bryant said. "The investor meeting with Delta Venture was moved up. This could be our funding breakthrough." "Perfect," Meredith snapped, slamming her mug down. "I'll just go alone again. At least I won't have to explain crypto to confused old ladies while you stand there looking like you haven't slept in weeks." "This isn't just crypto, Meredith. If Prometheus works." If. She cut him off. 3 years of if, Bryant. Meanwhile, Abby barely knows her father. "I'm using credit cards to maintain appearances, and you're chasing digital fairy gold." What Meredith didn't understand, or refused to, was that Bryant wasn't creating just another cryptocurrency. Prometheus was designed to be unhackable, untraceable, and capable of processing transactions in milliseconds. If successful, it would revolutionize everything from banking to international trade. 6 more months, Bryant promised. "That's all I need." "You said that 6 months ago," Meredith replied coldly. "And 6 months before that." The doorbell interrupted their standoff. Bryant opened the door to find his mentor and former professor, Dr. Franklin Webb, standing there with a knowing smile. "Am I interrupting?" "I brought bagels," said the silver-haired academic who'd first introduced Bryant to blockchain technology during his graduate studies. "Franklin." Meredith's demeanor shifted instantly to charm mode. "What a lovely surprise. Come in." Over breakfast, Franklin updated them on his connections at MIT's Digital Currency Initiative. They're working on similar protocols, but nothing as elegant as Prometheus. "Bryant, your approach to the consensus mechanism is completely revolutionary." Bryant noticed Meredith's expression change slightly at this external validation. For years, she'd assumed his work was a pipe dream because none of their social circle understood it. The Sanderson Foundation is looking to diversify their investment portfolio into blockchain, Franklin mentioned casually. They're hoping to find the next big innovation before it explodes. Meredith's eyebrows rose. The Sandersons were Boston old money. Pillars of the society she desperately wanted to join. Bryant's presenting to potential investors tomorrow night, she said quickly. But perhaps the weekend after? I'll make the introduction, Franklin promised. They'll be impressed. After Franklin left, Meredith was uncharacteristically thoughtful. Maybe I've been too hard on you, she admitted. But you have to understand how difficult this has been. Bryant embraced her, relief washing over him. It's almost over. Everything's about to change. What Bryant couldn't know was how prophetic those words would prove, but not in the way he imagined. Later that week, at the charity gala Meredith attended alone, she would meet a man who would set in motion the complete unraveling of their lives. His name was Dorian Frost, and he would take particular interest when Meredith mentioned her husband's blockchain project. Chapter 2. The Interloper. The Delta Venture meeting had been a disaster. The investors, a group of traditional finance types, couldn't grasp Bryant's vision for Prometheus. So it's like Bitcoin? One had asked dismissively. No, it's an entirely different, Bryant had tried to explain before being cut off. We've seen crypto come and go. What makes yours special? By the time Bryant returned home, exhausted and defeated, Meredith was already back from the gala, humming as she removed her earrings in their bedroom. How was your meeting? She asked, with unusual interest. They didn't get it, Bryant sighed. How was the gala? Meredith's eyes lit up. Actually, I met someone you should talk to. Dorian Frost. He runs Crescent Capital Partners and specifically invests in blockchain technology. Bryant perked up. Really? Did you tell him about Prometheus? Just the basics, she smiled. He was fascinated. He wants to meet you. 3 days later, Bryant sat across from Dorian Frost at an upscale restaurant downtown. Frost was everything Bryant wasn't. Polished, charismatic, with an ease that came from old money and elite schools. At 45, he exuded success from his tailored suit to his confident smile. Meredith described your project quite passionately, Frost said, swirling his Bordeaux. Though I suspect she didn't quite grasp the technical details. She tries, Bryant said defensively. Of course, Frost nodded sympathetically. It must be difficult having a vision others can't see. Tell me about Prometheus. Unlike the Delta Venture investors, Frost asked insightful questions that showed genuine understanding. By dessert, Bryant felt he'd finally found someone who recognized Prometheus's potential. I'd like my technical team to review your work, Frost said. If it's as groundbreaking as it sounds, Crescent could offer substantial backing. Over the next weeks, Frost became a fixture in their lives. He invited the Noviks to exclusive events, sent gifts for Abby, and arranged for Bryant to pitch to serious tech investors. Meredith bloomed under his attention, dressing more expensively and laughing more freely than she had in years. Bryant was too preoccupied with finalizing Prometheus to notice the subtle shifts. Meredith's lingering glances at Frost, their private jokes, the way she touched her hair when he entered a room. He didn't see the text messages or the accidental meetings when Bryant was working. Franklin Webb noticed, however. After observing Meredith and Frost at a tech conference reception, he pulled Bryant aside. How much does Frost know about your algorithms? He asked sharply. The general architecture, Bryant replied. Nothing proprietary. What? Something feels off, Franklin frowned. I checked his background. Crescent Capital has a pattern of investing in startups, gaining access to their IP, then abandoning them after filing competing patents. Dorian wouldn't do that, Bryant said. He gets the vision. Just be careful what you share, Franklin warned. And maybe pay more attention to your wife. Bryant dismissed the warning as paranoia, but a seed of doubt was planted. That night, he came home early and overheard Meredith on the phone in their bedroom. He doesn't suspect anything, she was saying softly. He's completely focused on the launch. Yes, I've seen the documents, but they're password protected. I know what's at stake, Dorian. Bryant froze, heart pounding. He backed away silently, mind racing. In his home office, he checked his security logs and discovered someone had attempted to access his protected files from Meredith's laptop. The next morning, instead of confronting her, Bryant set a trap. He created a folder labeled Prometheus_final_algorithms, containing altered code that would appear legitimate to non-experts, but would catastrophically fail if implemented. He deliberately mentioned the folder to Meredith over dinner. 3 years of work, finally compiled in one place, he said. The patent attorney needs it by Tuesday. That night, he installed a keystroke logger on their home network and went to bed early, claiming exhaustion. At 1:23 a.m., His phone alerted him. The honeypot folder had been accessed and copied to a USB drive. Bryant lay in the darkness beside his sleeping wife, a cold clarity washing over him. The woman he'd loved for 12 years, the mother of his child, had betrayed him in the most fundamental way. Instead of confrontation, he chose calculation. He would let the trap play out while accelerating his real work on Prometheus. The betrayal crystallized something in him, a ruthless resolve that burned away his former trust and replaced it with icy determination. By morning, he had formulated a plan that would not only protect his work, but would eventually make Meredith and Frost pay dearly for their treachery. "You seem different," Meredith commented over breakfast, studying his face. Bryant smiled pleasantly. "Just excited. Things are finally coming together." She had no idea how true that statement was, or that the man sitting across from her had fundamentally changed overnight. The old Bryant, trusting, somewhat naive, consumed by his vision, had died in the darkness. What remained was something far more dangerous, a brilliant mind fueled by betrayal. Chapter 3. The Deception. Over the next 2 months, Bryant played an elaborate charade. On the surface, he continued working feverishly on Prometheus, while growing increasingly distracted and despondent. He deliberately left financial statements showing dwindling resources around the house and started forgetting important social events. "Mom says you're having a breakdown," Abby said one evening as Bryant taught her chess in his office, the one place he was certain wasn't bugged by Frost's people. "What do you think?" Bryant asked carefully. Abby studied the board before moving her knight. "I think you're playing a long game. Like in chess." Bryant smiled at his daughter's perceptiveness. "Sometimes, Pumpkin, when people think you're losing, it gives you an advantage they don't expect." Behind the scenes, Bryant had secretly completed the actual Prometheus protocol, storing the authentic code on servers only he could access. The version he worked on at home was an elaborate decoy, functional enough to seem legitimate, but missing the revolutionary elements that made Prometheus truly valuable. Meanwhile, he hired a private investigator to document Meredith's affair with Frost. The evidence mounted quickly. Hotel rendezvous, intimate dinners, and explicit text messages discussing their plans for Bryant's technology and money. Most painful was discovering Meredith had involved Abby in their schemes. The investigators' photos showed Frost taking Abby for ice cream, buying her expensive gifts, and gradually positioning himself as a father figure. In several photos, Abby looked uncomfortable but compliant. "He's manipulating my daughter," Bryant muttered, staring at the images. "There's more," the investigator said grimly, sliding across divorce papers already drafted in Meredith's name. "They're planning something soon. The lawyer is Huntington. She's known for aggressive settlements that leave spouses with nothing." Father's Day fell on a Sunday in mid-June. The evening before, Bryant received a text from Franklin. Frost met with Chinese investors claiming proprietary blockchain technology. Moving timeline up, Bryant responded, "Proceeding as planned. Stand by." That night, he securely uploaded the real Prometheus protocol to Franklin's server with specific instructions. "Launch only if you receive my signal or if I'm incapacitated for more than 72 hours. The next morning, Abby bounced into their bedroom carrying a tray with burnt toast and coffee. "Happy Father's Day, Daddy," she exclaimed. "We've got a super special surprise for you." Meredith appeared, looking nervous but determined. "We've been planning this for weeks, haven't we, sweetie?" Bryant noted the strain in her smile, the way she avoided his eyes. He'd expected something today, but played along with practiced obliviousness. "What's my surprise?" he asked, pretending excitement. "You have to be blindfolded." Abby giggled, producing a silk tie. "Is this necessary?" Bryant asked, feigning reluctance. "No peeking." Meredith insisted, tying it around his eyes. "It's tradition for big surprises." Bryant felt himself being guided downstairs and into their car. The drive lasted approximately 20 minutes before they stopped. "Almost there," Meredith said, her voice tight as she led him into a building and down a hallway. When the blindfold came off, Bryant found himself in an elegantly appointed office facing a stern-looking woman behind a mahogany desk. Dorian Frost sat in a corner chair, attempting to look solemn but failing to hide the triumph in his eyes. "Mr. Novick," the woman said professionally, "I'm Valerie Huntington. Your wife felt this setting might help keep things civil." On the desk lay a stack of documents. divorce papers demanding 75% of all assets and intellectual property, full custody of Abby and their house. Sign these, and we can all move on, Meredith said coldly. Dorian has kindly offered to mediate. Bryant looked at his daughter, who stood confused by the door, clearly not understanding what was happening. He saw the moment she realized this wasn't a happy surprise, her face crumpling in betrayal. You told me we were giving Daddy a special day, Abby whispered. Grown-up business, sweetie, Meredith dismissed her. Wait in the hall. As Abby left, tears streaming down her face, something hardened permanently in Bryant. He turned to Huntington with surprising calm. May I review these documents? For 2 hours, Bryant meticulously read every page while Meredith grew increasingly agitated. Frost checked his watch repeatedly. Finally, Bryant looked up. And if I don't sign? We go to court, Huntington replied, where evidence of your mental instability, financial mismanagement, and parental neglect will be presented. Bryant nodded thoughtfully. I see. With deliberate slowness, he signed every page, his expression unreadable. Meredith didn't notice the slight smile that flickered across his face when he reached page 17, the intellectual property transfer. Congratulations on your freedom, Meredith, Bryant said quietly as he stood to leave. I hope it brings you everything you deserve. In the hallway, he knelt before a tearful Abby. Did you know about this? He asked gently. Mom said we were surprising you with a special Father's Day, she sobbed. She said the blindfold was part of the fun. Listen carefully, Bryant whispered, wiping her tears. Sometimes things aren't what they seem. No matter what happens next, remember I love you more than anything in this world. As Bryant walked away, Frost emerged from the office with a triumphant smile. No hard feelings, right? Business is business. Bryant looked at him with such cold intensity that Frost's smile faltered. You know what the ancient Greeks said about Prometheus? Bryant asked quietly. He wasn't just punished for stealing fire. He was punished for giving power to those who didn't understand its consequences. With that cryptic statement, Bryant walked out, leaving his soon-to-be ex-wife and her lover believing they had won. They couldn't have been more wrong. Chapter 4, The Fallout. The week following the divorce ambush was precisely orchestrated chaos. Bryant moved into a modest apartment across town while Meredith and Frost celebrated their victory with a weekend in the Hamptons. Photos of them on Frost's yacht circulated among their social circle, cementing Bryant's humiliation. What no one saw was Bryant in a secure basement facility at MIT, working furiously with Franklin Webb to launch the authentic Prometheus protocol. While Frost's technical team struggled with the sabotaged code, Bryant activated the final version on a protected network. They'll realize soon that the code they stole is fundamentally flawed, Franklin observed as they monitored the deployment. By then, it won't matter, Bryant replied, eyes fixed on the screens showing transaction processing speeds that shattered all existing records. Prometheus wasn't merely a new cryptocurrency. It was an entirely new framework for digital value exchange with military-grade security protocols. While Bitcoin processed 7 transactions per second, Prometheus handled over 10,000 while maintaining perfect anonymity. On day 6 after the divorce, Abby called Bryant in tears. Mom's changing all the locks, she sobbed. She says I can't see you until the custody hearing. Did you secure what I asked for? Bryant asked calmly. Yes, Abby whispered. I put your backup drives and the papers from your safe in the hollow tree like you showed me. Good girl, Bryant said. Remember our chess lessons? This is just the opening game. That night, Bryant retrieved the hidden materials, including evidence of Meredith's affair, financial documentation, and most importantly, proof that his intellectual property had been developed years before meeting Frost. The next morning, he received a call from Sullivan Gardner, his divorce attorney. They filed an emergency motion claiming you're hiding assets, Sullivan reported. And there's something else. Frost has submitted patent applications remarkably similar to your work. Right on schedule, Bryant noted calmly. You don't seem surprised, Sullivan observed. I'm not, Bryant replied. File our counter-motion immediately with exhibits A through F. The exhibits contained devastating evidence. Meredith's documented affair, her attempts to access Bryant's secured files, and most damaging, Frost's pattern of intellectual property theft from previous startups. By week's end, the legal momentum had shifted dramatically. The judge, initially sympathetic to Meredith's claims, now viewed the case with open skepticism. Bryant's apparent cooperation, signing the divorce papers without contest, had created the impression of a man with nothing to hide. Meanwhile, Abby's court-appointed advocate reported the child's distress at being used in the Father's Day deception, further damaging Meredith's custody position. 10 days after the divorce ambush, Bryant sat alone in his apartment, monitoring cryptocurrency exchanges worldwide as Prometheus quietly went live. Unlike typical crypto launches with flashy marketing, Prometheus was introduced through trusted channels to specific high-value users seeking absolute transaction privacy. While Frost pursued patents for the flawed technology, the real Prometheus began processing millions in transactions, its value climbing steadily without drawing attention from mainstream financial media. Bryant's phone rang. Meredith, the first time since the divorce. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Dorian's team says there are problems with the code." "What a surprise," Bryant replied flatly. "Don't be childish," she snapped. "We're offering $50,000 for consultation services to fix the issues." Bryant laughed softly. $50,000 for 3 years of work? Your boyfriend must be getting desperate. $100,000, she countered quickly. "Goodbye, Meredith." 2 days later, the offer had risen to $500,000. Bryant ignored each call, focused instead on Prometheus's growth and the careful documentation of Frost's increasingly frantic attempts to salvage the stolen code. While Frost's technical team floundered, the authentic Prometheus protocol gained traction in exclusive financial circles, its perfect transaction record and unprecedented security features attracting serious attention from privacy-focused investors. 18 days after the divorce, Bryant received an unexpected visitor at his apartment, Abby, who had slipped away during a shopping trip with her mother. "Mom and Dorian fight all the time now," she reported, sitting cross-legged on his couch. "He keeps saying you sabotaged something, and she says he promised he checked the code before." Bryant listened carefully, asking strategic questions that Abby answered with the directness of a child not understanding the full implications. "He has people watching our house," she added. "I saw them in a car outside." Bryant's expression hardened. "Has he threatened you in any way?" "No, but..." Abby hesitated. "Yesterday, he said if you wouldn't help fix the problems, they might need to convince you another way." Bryant took photos of a bruise on Abby's arm, where Frost had grabbed her during an argument with Meredith, and immediately called his attorney. "We need an emergency custody hearing," he insisted, "and file for a restraining order against Frost." The next day, the cryptocurrency world woke to news of a mysterious new protocol showing transaction volumes that dwarfed established networks. Speculation about the creator of Prometheus spread through financial channels, with particular interest from Chinese investors who had recently been approached by Frost with promises of revolutionary technology. 23 days after the divorce, Bryant sat in court as temporary custody of Abby was transferred to him following the revelation of the bruising incident and Abby's testimony about the hostile environment. Meredith, disheveled and clearly stressed, approached Bryant in the courthouse hallway. "What have you done?" she hissed. "Dorian says the Prometheus code is completely worthless. His investors are threatening legal action." "How unfortunate," Bryant replied without emotion. "Perhaps you should have verified what you were stealing before you stole it." "We're ruined," she said, her voice breaking. "The house is mortgaged to fund development. Dorian's investors want their money back, and now I've lost Abby too." For a moment, Bryant almost felt pity. Then he remembered the Father's Day ambush, the months of betrayal, the manipulation of his daughter. "Chess lesson number 1, he said quietly. "Never assume you understand the game your opponent is playing." As he walked away with Abby's hand in his, Bryant received a text from Franklin. "Prometheus just crossed 1 billion in transaction volume. Time to go public." Bryant smiled down at his daughter. "How would you like to see your dad's work finally pay off?" "Will it make you happy again?" she asked. "I'm already happy," he said, squeezing her hand. "I have what matters most." What he didn't say was that his happiness now coexisted with something darker, a cold determination to see his betrayers face the full consequences of their actions. The real game was just beginning. Chapter 5, The Ascension. Bryant chose an unassuming name for his corporate entity, Promethean Systems. He established it using a complex web of LLCs that obscured his direct ownership while maintaining absolute control. From a converted warehouse space that served as both office and temporary home for him and Abby, he began building his empire. "Why are we living here instead of getting a nice house?" Abby asked one evening, doing homework at a folding table while Bryant monitored international crypto exchanges. "What does chess teach us about appearing weak when you're strong?" Bryant countered. "Make your opponent underestimate you," she replied promptly. "Exactly. Right now, everyone thinks your dad is a broken man who lost everything." In reality, Bryant's position strengthened daily. Prometheus's underlying protocol processed over $3 billion in transactions in its first month, generating substantial mining fees that flowed through untraceable channels back to Promethean systems. Meanwhile, Frost faced mounting disasters. The Chinese investors who had fronted $20 million for the revolutionary blockchain technology discovered the code was fundamentally flawed. Their subsequent lawsuit named both Frost and Meredith, freezing their assets pending resolution. Meredith, now living in Frost's downtown penthouse, faced her own crisis when the divorce court appointed a forensic accountant who discovered she had diverted household funds to private accounts for months before the divorce. Bryant tracked these developments through his attorney while methodically executing Phase 2 of his plan, legitimizing Prometheus for mainstream adoption. 45 days after the divorce, Bryant arranged a meeting with Sylvia Torres, CEO of Nexus Pay, a digital payment processor struggling against larger competitors. In a secure conference room, Bryant demonstrated Prometheus's capabilities. "This processes how many transactions per second?" Torres asked incredulously. 20,000 in the current implementation, Bryant replied, with potential to scale to 50,000. "And the security protocol?" "Quantum-resistant encryption with perfect forward secrecy. Essentially unhackable with current technology." Torres studied him carefully. "Why come to Nexus Pay? With this technology, any major player would give you billions." "Because you'll give me something more valuable than money," Bryant explained. "Complete anonymity while we scale. The major players would want their branding, their control. I need a partner willing to follow my implementation timeline precisely." The deal they struck would later be recognized as one of the most lopsided in financial technology history. Nexus Pay received non-exclusive implementation rights to Prometheus in exchange for 30% of transaction fees and a critical clause. Bryant's identity would remain completely confidential. With institutional backing secured, Prometheus began its controlled expansion. Nexus Pay's stock surged 400% in 2 weeks as they announced a revolutionary new processing system that protected user privacy while drastically reducing transaction costs. 60 days after the divorce, Franklin Webb visited the warehouse headquarters with news from academic circles. "MIT wants to give you the Pioneer in Digital Economics Award," he announced. "Your protocol has been analyzed by their cryptography team, and they're calling it the most significant advancement since Bitcoin." "Decline politely," Bryant instructed. "The time isn't right for public recognition." Instead, Bryant focused on establishing the infrastructure that would ultimately serve his revenge. He created a specialized team, young, brilliant cryptographers and systems engineers, sworn to secrecy and compensated with Prometheus tokens now worth millions. "Your mission," he told them, "is to create perfect financial transparency where anonymity currently exists." This seemingly paradoxical goal would become the foundation of what his team called Project Nemesis, a specialized application of Prometheus technology that could trace and expose hidden financial transactions without being detected. 70 days after the divorce, Bryant received intelligence that Frost had leveraged his remaining assets to short Nexus Pay stock, believing the surge was a temporary bubble. The irony wasn't lost on Bryant. Frost was now financially betting against the very technology he had tried to steal. While Prometheus flourished, Bryant maintained his modest lifestyle with Abby, now attending a new school where she was thriving away from the toxic environment of her mother's home. The custody arrangement allowed Meredith's supervised visitation, which she increasingly canceled as her financial and legal troubles mounted. "Does Mom not want to see me anymore?" Abby asked after the third consecutive cancellation. "Your mother is going through a difficult time," Bryant answered carefully. "Some people find it hard to face those they've hurt." 85 days after the divorce, the financial world was rocked by a Bloomberg article analyzing the explosive growth of the Prometheus protocol and speculating about its anonymous creator. The piece estimated the unknown developer's holdings at approximately $3.7 billion, making them one of the wealthiest individuals in cryptocurrency. The day after publication, Meredith called Bryant for the first time in weeks. "I know what you've done," she said, her voice a mixture of anger and desperation. "The real Prometheus was never in our home system, was it? You're only now figuring that out?" Bryant replied. "Disappointing. Dorian is ruined," she continued. "The investor lawsuits, legal fees, we're selling the penthouse. He blames me for not getting better access to your work." "How tragic," Bryant responded without inflection. "I assume that's why you've been canceling visitations with Abby." "I can't face her," Meredith admitted, her voice breaking. "Not like this. Broke, being evicted, with legal troubles. This isn't the life I wanted." "Choices have consequences, Meredith. You chose Frost. You chose deception. You chose to use our daughter in your schemes." "I made a terrible mistake," she whispered. "Is there any way we could?" "No," Bryant interrupted with finality. "There isn't." After hanging up, Bryant received an alert from his monitoring system. Someone had attempted to access his old email accounts and financial records. The source traced back to Frost's private server. Bryant smiled coldly. Even facing complete ruin, Frost was still searching for leverage, still believing he could outsmart the man he had so grievously underestimated. "Time for the endgame," Bryant murmured, opening his secure messaging system to activate the final phase of Project Nemesis. 90 days after the divorce, Bryant Novick disappeared completely from public view, his modest apartment emptied overnight. Abby was temporarily placed with Franklin Webb, who cited a family emergency requiring Bryant's immediate attention overseas. In truth, Bryant had moved to a secure compound outside Seattle, where Project Nemesis entered its final implementation stage. From this fortified location, surrounded by his elite team, he prepared to unveil the full power of Prometheus, not just as a revolutionary financial technology, but as an instrument of perfect, inescapable justice. The disappearance coincided with rumors in financial circles of an imminent major announcement about Prometheus's creator. The cryptocurrency's value surged in anticipation, crossing the threshold that would officially make its anonymous developer a billionaire. 100 days after the divorce, a simple press release from Promethean Systems announced, the developer known as Prometheus will address the World Economic Technology Summit via secure video link on Thursday. The countdown to revelation had begun. Chapter 6. The Unveiling. The World Economic Technology Summit in Davos attracted the global financial elite. CEOs, central bankers, and technology visionaries gathered in the Swiss Alpine resort to discuss the future of money. The unscheduled announcement of Prometheus's creator's appearance sent shockwaves through the conference. In a Boston apartment, Dorian Frost and Meredith Novick watched the live stream, their once luxurious surroundings replaced by rented furniture. Frost had aged visibly in the months since the divorce debacle, his confident demeanor replaced by nervous agitation. "This could be our chance," he muttered, pouring his third scotch of the morning. "If we can prove connection to your ex-husband's work." Meredith's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Watch carefully. B." Her blood ran cold. "Dorian, I think Bryant is behind this announcement." On stage in Davos, the moderator addressed the packed auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to present a secure transmission from the creator of the Prometheus protocol, whose identity has remained the financial world's greatest mystery." The massive screen illuminated, showing not a face but the Prometheus symbol, a stylized figure holding digital fire. A digitally altered voice spoke. "Prometheus stole fire from the gods to empower humanity. Today, I'm revealing how this new financial fire can illuminate what has long remained hidden." The voice explained how Prometheus wasn't merely a transaction protocol, but a sophisticated system capable of tracing and verifying financial movements through seemingly impenetrable shells and privacy structures. To demonstrate, I've selected a case study involving systematic intellectual property theft and financial fraud. The screen changed to display familiar faces, Dorian Frost and several Chinese investors at a meeting dated 3 weeks before Bryant's divorce. "Oh God," Meredith whispered, watching in horror. Documents appeared showing Frost had received $36 million from Chinese state-backed funds in exchange for technology he didn't own. Bank records revealed how he'd moved the money through 17 jurisdictions traditionally considered financial black holes. The voice continued implacably. Prometheus can follow these transactions precisely, revealing how these funds were used to bribe patent officials, manipulate court proceedings, and attempt to steal intellectual property developed by others. In Boston, Frost lunged for his phone. "We need to leave now. If the feds see this." The apartment door crashed open as federal agents swarmed in, weapons drawn. "Dorian Frost, you're under arrest for wire fraud, intellectual property theft, and violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act." As Frost was handcuffed, an agent approached Meredith. "Meredith Novick? We have some questions about your involvement in Mr. Frost's activities." In Davos, the presentation continued, meticulously documenting how Prometheus had tracked complex financial crimes previously considered untraceable. Banking executives shifted uncomfortably as the system demonstrated capabilities that rendered traditional financial secrecy obsolete. Near the conclusion, the digitally altered voice made an announcement that sent cryptocurrency markets into frenzy. "Today, I'm transferring control of the Prometheus Foundation to a consortium of international universities. My personal holdings, valued at approximately $5.6 billion, will fund research into ethical implementations of this technology." The screen shifted to show the Foundation's inaugural board of directors, distinguished cryptographers, ethicists, and economists. Among them was Dr. Franklin Webb, listed as acting director. As global media exploded with the news, Bryant Novick sat in his Seattle compound watching multiple screens. One showed the Davos presentation, another displayed Frost being led to a police vehicle, and a third monitored cryptocurrency exchanges where Prometheus tokens surged to unprecedented values. A secure phone rang. "Franklin, it's working perfectly," the professor reported. "The Justice Department is already requesting access to Prometheus for their financial crimes division." "They'll have it," Bryant replied, "with specific limitations." "The board position was unexpected," Franklin noted. "I assume you have your reasons." "Someone I trust needs to guard against misuse," Bryant explained. "Power corrupts, even digital power." After hanging up, Bryant opened his laptop to check one final operation: the complete financial destruction of those who had betrayed him. Frost's assets were now frozen by federal authorities. The Chinese investors faced their own government's wrath for a failed operation. And Meredith? Bryant had been more surgical with her. Rather than criminal charges, he'd ensured complete financial ruin. Her credit was destroyed, her reputation in tatters, her expensive tastes now impossible to maintain. The house she'd fought for in the divorce was underwater in debt, and the cushy alimony payments she'd expected were legally voided by her documented affair and involvement in Frost's schemes. The revenge Bryant had crafted wasn't merely about punishment. It was about irreversible consequence. There would be no recovery for Frost or Meredith, no second chances, no redemption narrative. They had tried to destroy him and had instead destroyed themselves. Bryant's phone lit up with a familiar number. Meredith again, the first of what would become 78 increasingly desperate calls over the next week. He declined without hesitation as he packed a suitcase. Tomorrow, he and Abby would move into their new home, a modest but comfortable lakeside property chosen for its security rather than ostentation. Bryant had no interest in the trappings of wealth that had so obsessed Meredith. That evening, as news channels worldwide reported on the crypto-billionaire divorce connection, Bryant sat with Abby watching the sunset over the Seattle skyline. "Is it over now?" she asked, intuitive as always. "The hard part is," Bryant confirmed, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Mom called my school today," Abby said quietly. "She was crying, asking about me." Bryant considered his response carefully. The ruthlessness that had driven his revenge didn't extend to poisoning his daughter against her mother, despite everything. "Your mother made terrible choices," he said finally. "But she does love you in her way. Can I see her sometimes?" "If you want to," Bryant replied. "That's your choice to make." "What about you?" Abby asked. "Will you ever forgive her?" Bryant looked out at the darkening sky, his expression hardening. "No, Abby. Some betrayals don't get forgiveness." The media never connected Bryant Novick to the Prometheus protocol. As far as the world knew, the brilliant developer remained anonymous, his identity one of the great mysteries of the financial world. Only a small circle, Franklin Webb, Bryant's core development team, and eventually Abby, when she was old enough to understand, knew the truth, that the man who had revolutionized global finance had done so partly to create the perfect vehicle for justice against those who had betrayed him. And justice, in Bryant Novick's world, came without mercy. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Recent divorcee single dad become crypto billionaire. The headline splashed across financial news sites worldwide exactly 1 week after the Davos revelation. While the article didn't name Bryant specifically, the timing and circumstances left little doubt for those involved. Meredith had called Bryant 78 times in those 7 days. Each call declined without comment. The Prometheus Foundation opened headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with Dr. Franklin Webb guiding its integration into legitimate financial systems. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors built what they called airtight cases against Frost and his co-conspirators using evidence provided through the Prometheus system. 6 months after the divorce, Bryant and Abby settled into their new routine in a Seattle suburb. Their home, modern but understated, sat on 5 secure acres beside a private lake. Bryant worked remotely as a blockchain consultant, his connection to Prometheus known to only a trusted few. "Dad, someone's here to see you," Abby called one Saturday morning. "She says she's your ex-wife." Bryant found Meredith standing in their entryway, significantly changed from the polished socialite who had orchestrated his humiliation. Her designer clothes had been replaced by off-the-rack basics, her perfect highlights grown out, her confident posture diminished. "How did you find us?" Bryant asked coldly. "I hired a private investigator," she admitted. "It took most of my remaining money." "You shouldn't be here," Bryant said, ushering her outside where Abby couldn't overhear. "Our communication goes through attorneys. They've frozen all Dorian's assets," Meredith said desperately. "I have nothing. The house is in foreclosure, my credit is destroyed, and no one in our old circle will speak to me." "Consequences," Bryant replied simply. "I know you're behind Prometheus," she pressed. "The timing, the technology, it can't be coincidence." Bryant's expression remained impassive. "You should leave." "I made a terrible mistake," Meredith pleaded, tears forming. "I was frustrated and patient. Dorian manipulated me with promises." "Stop," Bryant interrupted sharply. "You weren't manipulated. You were greedy and disloyal. You used our daughter in your schemes." "I still love you," she whispered. Something flashed in Bryant's eyes, not compassion, but disgust. "Is that what this is about? You've lost your rich boyfriend, your lifestyle, so now you love me again? Now that I have what you always wanted?" "It's not like that," she protested weakly. "You blindfolded me and led me to a divorce lawyer on Father's Day," Bryant reminded her, his voice dangerously controlled. "You conspired to steal everything I'd built. You chose Frost over your family. There is no coming back from that. Not ever." Meredith's desperation turned to anger. "You cold bastard. You engineered all of this."
The
Dorian's
company had
arrest, my
overextended,
financial
investing
ruin, for
heavily in
revenge.
improving technologies.
No, Bryant corrected.
They needed Pinnacle's
I simply built
patents
something
and client base
revolutionary
to secure
while
their
protecting
future.
what was mine.
Exactly
What
why
happened to
Desmond
you?
had
And Frost
targeted
was
the
your own
smaller
doing.
company first.
After Meredith left,
Remington's been
Bryant
using
found
Valerie
Abby
to get
waiting
information
inside,
on our deal.
clearly having
Theo
overheard
surmised
parts
during
of the
their private
conversation.
meeting at
Mom
Desmond's
looked really
office.
sad, she
Yes,
observed.
Desmond's
"She is
voice
sad,"
was
Bryant
devoid of
acknowledged.
emotion, and she's
Sometimes
been a
people
willing
make choices
informant.
that lead to
"What are you going to
sadness,
do?"
like choosing
Desmond
the
looked
wrong
out his
person.
office window
Abby
at the
asked
Seattle
with
skyline,
unsettling
the
perception.
gears of his mind
"Yes,"
turning.
Bryant confirmed.
Changed the game
Like
entirely.
That
Chapter
evening,
3.
Bryant
The
received a
Discovery.
call from Franklin
Late
Webb
one
with
evening,
disturbing
as
news.
rain lashed against
Frost
the
made bail
windows
this
of their
afternoon.
suburban home,
His legal team
Desmond
claimed
sat in his darkened
prosecutorial
office,
misconduct.
waiting.
How?
The house was
Bryant
silent
demanded.
save for the
The
occasional
evidence
rumble of
is
thunder.
irrefutable.
At precisely
They're arguing the
10:42
Prometheus
p.m.,
tracking
Valerie's
violated
car
privacy
pulled into the
laws,
garage.
Franklin
He heard her
explained.
enter,
It's
moving
tenuous,
quietly
but it bought
as if
him
afraid
temporary
to wake
freedom.
him.
I'm
Her
more
heels
concerned
clicked
about his
softly
mental
on the
state.
hardwood
He was
floor as she
overheard
passed his
making
office
threats
door.
against you
The company had
specifically. Bryant
overextended,
intensified
investing
security
heavily in
measures at their
improving
home, but
technologies.
refused to
They
disrupt
needed
Abby's
Pinnacle's
routine.
patents and
"We don't
client
live in
base to
fear,"
secure their
he
future.
told his security chief.
Exactly why Desmond
prepare
had
and
targeted the
remain
smaller
vigilant.
company first.
3 days later,
Remington's
Bryant
been
received
using
an
Valerie
encrypted
to get
message
information
from
on
an
our
anonymous
deal.
source.
Theo
Surveillance
surmised during
photos
their
of him
private
and Abby
meeting
at her
at Desmond's
school,
office.
at grocery stores,
Yes,
at her soccer
Desmond's
practice.
voice was
The
devoid
message
of
contained
emotion,
one line.
and she's been a
"You
willing
took everything
informant.
from me.
What are you
Now
going
we're
to do?"
even."
Desmond
Bryant
looked out his
immediately
office
moved
window
Abby
at
to
the
their
Seattle
secured
skyline.
lake house,
The
while
gears
he
of his mind
implemented a
turning.
counter-surveillance
Changed the game
operation.
entirely.
Using
Chapter
Prometheus's
3.
capabilities,
The Discovery.
he tracked the
Late
digital
one
footprint
evening,
of the threat
as
to a
rain
motel
lashed against the
outside
windows
Seattle
of their
where
suburban
Frost had
home,
checked in under
Desmond
a false
sat
name.
in his darkened
Rather
office,
than involving
waiting.
authorities,
The house
Bryant
was silent
visited the
save for the
motel
occasional
himself
rumble
with
of
two
thunder.
private security
At precisely
contractors, former
10:42
Special
p.m.,
Forces operators
Valerie's
who
car
now
pulled
worked
into
for
the
Prometheus
garage.
Systems.
He heard her
The
enter,
confrontation
moving
in room
quietly
114
as if
was
afraid to
brief
wake him.
but definitive.
Her heels clicked
Frost,
softly on the
unshaven
hardwood
and
floor as she
clearly
passed his
unhinged,
office door.
reached
The
for a
company
weapon,
had
but was quickly
overextended,
subdued.
investing
"You
heavily
ruined
in
me,"
improving
Frost spat
technologies.
as he was pinned
They
to the
needed
floor.
Pinnacle's patents
"Everything I
and
built,
client
gone.
base to secure
You
their
built
future.
nothing," Bryant
Exactly
replied
why
coldly.
Desmond had
"You're a
targeted
thief
the
who
smaller
finally
company
stole from
first.
someone who could
Remington's
fight back."
been using
Bryant
Valerie to get
confiscated
information
Frost's
on our deal.
laptop, which
Theo
contained not
surmised
only the
during their
surveillance
private
photos,
meeting
but
at Desmond's
detailed
office.
plans to kidnap
Yes,
Abby for ransom.
Desmond's voice
The
was
evidence was
devoid of
anonymously
emotion,
delivered to
and
the
she's been a
U.S.
willing
Marshal
informant.
Service,
What are you
resulting
going
in
to do?
Frost's bail
Desmond
being
looked out
revoked
his
and
office
additional
window at the
charges
Seattle
filed.
skyline.
2 weeks
The
later,
gears of his
federal
mind
prosecutors approached
Changed the
Bryant
game
through
entirely.
intermediaries,
Chapter
seeking
3.
testimony
The
in their
Discovery.
expanding case
Late one
against
evening,
Frost's
as
network.
rain lashed
"I'll
against the
cooperate
windows of
fully,"
their suburban
Bryant
home,
agreed.
Desmond
Under one
sat in his
condition,
darkened
complete
office,
anonymity.
waiting. The
For the
house
next
was
month,
silent
Bryant
save for the
provided
occasional
testimony
rumble of
via
thunder.
secure video
At precisely
link, his identity
10:42
protected
p.m.,
by court
Valerie's
order.
car
The
pulled into the
evidence he
garage.
provided
He
expanded
heard her
the case
enter,
beyond
moving
Frost to
quietly
include
as if
corrupt
afraid to
patent
wake him.
officials,
Her heels clicked
compromised
softly
judges,
on the
and
hardwood
Chinese
floor as
military
she passed his
intelligence
office
officers
door.
who had
The
backed
company
the
had
technology theft.
overextended,
The
investing
investigation
heavily in
revealed
improving
something
technologies.
even more
They
disturbing.
needed Pinnacle's
Meredith's
patents
involvement
and client
had been
base to
deeper than
secure their
initially
future.
apparent.
Exactly
Email
why
records
Desmond
showed
had
she had been
targeted the
feeding
smaller
Frost
company
information
first.
about Bryant's
Remington's
work for
been
nearly
using
a year
Valerie
before
to
the
get
divorce,
information on our
motivated
deal.
not just
Theo
by the affair,
surmised during
but
their
by
private
promised
meeting
millions
at
when
Desmond's
Prometheus
office.
was stolen
Yes,
and commercialized.
Desmond's
When
voice was
confronted with
devoid
this
of emotion,
evidence,
and
Meredith
she's been a
accepted
willing
plea
informant.
deal to
What are you going
testify
to do?
against Frost,
Desmond looked out his
receiving
office
immunity
window
from
at the Seattle
prosecution in
skyline,
exchange for
the
complete
gears of his
cooperation.
mind turning.
She chose
Changed the game
self-preservation
entirely.
again.
Chapter
Franklin
3.
observed
The
when
Discovery.
Bryant shared this
Late one
development.
evening,
"Are you
as
surprised?"
rain lashed against the
"Not in the
windows of their
slightest,"
suburban
Bryant
home,
replied.
Desmond
Loyalty
sat
was
in his
never her
darkened
strong
office,
suit.
waiting.
The federal
house
case
was silent
expanded
save
to
for the
include
occasional
national
rumble of
security
thunder.
implications.
At precisely
As prosecutors
10:42
argued that
p.m.,
Frost's attempted
Valerie's
theft
car
of
pulled into the
Prometheus
garage.
technology
He heard her
constituted
enter,
economic
moving
espionage
quietly
backed
as if
by a foreign
afraid to
power.
wake him.
Meanwhile,
Her heels clicked
the
softly
legitimate
on the
Prometheus
hardwood
protocol
floor as she
continued
passed his
its
office
extraordinary
door. The
growth.
company had
Under the
overextended,
Foundation's guidance,
investing
it was
heavily in
adopted by
improving
major
technologies.
financial
They
institutions
needed
worldwide,
Pinnacle's patents and
revolutionizing
client base to
everything from
secure their
international
future.
wire transfers
Exactly why
to
Desmond
micropayments.
had targeted the smaller
Bryant's
company
initial
first.
vision, a
Remington's
transparent
been
yet
using
secure
Valerie to
system
get
that
information on our
democratized
deal.
financial access,
Theo
was
surmised
being
during their
realized
private
beyond
meeting
even
at
his
Desmond's
ambitious
office.
expectations.
Yes,
9
Desmond's
months after
voice
the
was
divorce,
devoid of
Bryant
emotion,
received a
and
formal
she's been a
letter from the
willing
Senate
informant.
Banking Committee
What are you going to
requesting
do?
the creator
Desmond
of
looked out his
Prometheus
office window at the
testify
Seattle
regarding
skyline,
its
the
implications
gears of his
for
mind
financial
turning.
regulation.
Changed the
To
game
Franklin,
entirely.
Bryant declined.
Chapter 3.
The technology
Discovery.
speaks for
Late
itself.
one
His
evening,
official response
as rain
stated,
lashed against
its
the windows
creator's
of their
identity
suburban
is
home,
irrelevant to
Desmond
policy
sat in his
considerations.
darkened office,
In truth,
waiting. The
Bryant
house
had
was
no
silent
interest in
save for
public
the occasional
recognition.
rumble of
His
thunder.
focus remained
At
on two
precisely
priorities:
10:42
raising
p.m.,
Abby in a
Valerie's
stable,
car pulled
secure
into the
environment,
garage.
and
He heard
ensuring
her enter,
Prometheus
moving
fulfilled its
quietly
potential
as if
without
afraid to
being
wake
corrupted
him.
by
Her
political
heels
or
clicked
corporate
softly on the
interests.
hardwood
1
floor
year
as
after
she
the
passed
Father's
his
Day
office
betrayal,
door. The company
Bryant
had
sat on his lakeside
overextended,
deck
investing
watching Abby
heavily in
swim with
improving
friends from her new
technologies.
school.
They
His
needed
phone
Pinnacle's
vibrated with
patents and
breaking
client
news.
base to
Dorian
secure their
Frost had
future.
been sentenced
Exactly
to
why
27
Desmond
years in
had
federal
targeted
prison
the
for
smaller
fraud,
company first.
economic espionage,
Remington's been
conspiracy,
using Valerie
and
to get
attempted
information
kidnapping.
on our deal.
There was no
Theo
satisfaction
surmised
in the
during
news,
their private
only a
meeting
sense of
at Desmond's
completion.
office.
The man who had
Yes,
plotted to steal
Desmond's
his life's
voice
work,
was
who had
devoid of
corrupted his
emotion,
wife and
and she's been a
threatened his
willing
daughter,
informant.
was facing
What are
justice.
you going to do?
Later that
Desmond
evening,
looked out
Abby
his
found
office
Bryant
window at the
working in his
Seattle
home office.
skyline, the
"Dad,
gears of his
are we
mind
rich?"
turning.
she asked
Changed the game
bluntly,
entirely.
sitting on the edge of his
Chapter
desk.
3.
Tommy
The
says
discovery.
his dad
Late
thinks you're
one
secretly
evening,
a billionaire.
as rain lashed
Bryant
against the
closed his
windows of their
laptop and
suburban
gave her his
home,
full attention.
Desmond
"What do
sat
you
in his
think?
darkened office,
I think we live in
waiting.
a nice house.
The house
but
was
not a
silent
mansion,"
save for
she
the
reasoned.
occasional rumble
"I don't
of
have a
thunder.
pony
At
or a private
precisely
jet.
10:42
So either we're not
p.m.,
rich,
Valerie's
or you're
car
weird about
pulled into
money."
the garage.
Bryant laughed,
He heard her
a
enter,
genuine sound
moving
that had become
quietly
more
as if
common
afraid
recently.
to wake him.
Maybe
Her
both are
heels
true.
clicked softly
Money
on
is
the
just a
hardwood
tool,
floor
Abby.
as she passed
It
his
can't
office
make you
door.
happy by
The company
itself.
had
But you did
overextended,
create Prometheus,
investing heavily
right?
in
She
improving
pressed.
technologies.
The thing
They
everyone's
needed
talking
Pinnacle's
about.
patents
What
and
makes you
client
think that?
base to secure
Uncle
their
Franklin
future.
has a Prometheus
Exactly why
Foundation
Desmond
coffee mug,
had targeted
she
the smaller
explained.
company first.
And you always get this look
Remington's
when it's
been
on the
using
news,
Valerie
like
to
you're
get
trying not
information
to
on our
smile.
deal.
Bryant
Theo
studied his
surmised during
perceptive
their
daughter.
private meeting
At 10,
at Desmond's office.
she'd already endured
Yes.
more upheaval
Desmond's
than most
voice
children,
was devoid
yet
of
had
emotion,
emerged resilient
and she's been a willing
insightful.
informant.
If I did
What are you
create
going
it,
to do?
he said carefully,
Desmond looked out
it
his
would need
office
to remain
window
a
at the
secret.
Seattle skyline.
Some secrets
The
protect
gears
the
of his
people we
mind
love.
turning.
Abby
Changed
nodded
the game
solemnly.
entirely.
Like how we don't
Chapter
tell people
3,
where we live
the discovery.
or what you really
Late
do.
one evening,
Exactly
as
like
rain
that.
lashed against
That
the
night,
windows
Bryant
of their
received
suburban
an
home,
email from
Desmond
Meredith.
sat
Her
in his
first
darkened
written
office,
communication
waiting.
since their
The house was
confrontation
silent
months earlier.
save for the
The
occasional
message
rumble
was
of
brief.
thunder.
I'm
At
leaving for a
precisely
fresh start
10:42
overseas.
p.m.,
Please tell
Valerie's
Abby
car
I'm sorry
pulled
for
into the
everything.
garage.
I won't
He heard her
contact you
enter,
again.
moving
Bryant didn't
quietly
respond.
as if afraid
Some
to wake
chapters
him.
needed to stay
Her heels
closed.
clicked
The
softly
next
on the
day brought
hardwood
news that
floor
would
as she
accelerate
passed his office
Bryant's
door.
carefully
The company had
constructed endgame.
overextended,
The Justice
investing
Department
heavily
announced a
in improving
specialized financial
technologies.
crimes unit
They needed
dedicated
Pinnacle's
to using
patents and
Prometheus
client base to
technology
secure
to
their
track
future.
previously
Exactly why
untraceable
Desmond
transactions.
had targeted the
They're
smaller
requesting
company
direct
first.
technical
Remington's
support from
been
the
using
Foundation.
Valerie to
Franklin
get information
reported.
on our deal.
This is what you've been
Theo
waiting
surmised
for.
during their
Implement
private
phase
meeting
3,
at Desmond's
Bryant
office.
instructed.
Yes.
It's time.
Desmond's
Phase
voice
3
was
represented
devoid of
the
emotion,
culmination of
and she's
Bryant's
been a
vision
willing
for
informant.
Prometheus.
What are you
Not
going to
merely
do?
as a
Desmond looked
cryptocurrency
out
or
his office
transaction
window at
protocol,
the Seattle
but as
skyline.
an instrument
The
of
gears of his
fundamental
mind
change
turning.
in how
Changed the
economic
game
power
entirely.
functioned worldwide.
Chapter 3,
The blindfold
the
had been
discovery.
lifted
Late
not
one
just
evening,
from Bryant's
as
eyes,
rain lashed
but from
against
the
the
global
windows of
financial
their
system
suburban
itself.
home,
The
Desmond
darkness
sat
where
in his
corruption
darkened
and
office,
theft once
waiting.
flourished
The
was
house
now
was silent
illuminated by
save
the
for the
fire he had
occasional rumble
created.
of thunder.
And like the
At
mythical
precisely
figure whose name he
10:42
had borrowed,
p.m.,
Bryant
Valerie's
Novick
car
had
pulled into
stolen
the
fire
garage.
from the gods
He
of
heard her
finance
enter,
and given
moving
it to humanity,
quietly as if
knowing
afraid to
full
wake
well
him.
the personal
Her heels
cost
clicked
such
softly
defiance
on the
would
hardwood
demand.
floor
He
as
had
she
paid that
passed his
price
office
willingly.
door. The
And
company had
unlike those who had
overextended,
betrayed him,
investing
he had
heavily
emerged
in
not
improving
just intact,
technologies.
but
They needed
transformed.
Pinnacle's patents
Chapter 8,
and client
The
base to
Illumination.
secure their future.
18 months after
Exactly
the
why
divorce,
Desmond
the Prometheus
had targeted the
protocol
smaller
had
company
fundamentally
first.
altered the global
Remington's been
financial
using
landscape.
Valerie to get
Traditional
information on
tax
our deal.
havens struggled
Theo
to
surmised
justify their
during their
existence
private meeting
when
at
Prometheus
Desmond's office.
could track money
Yes.
through previously
Desmond's
impenetrable
voice was
structures.
devoid of emotion.
Corruption networks
and she's
found
been
their
a willing
once secret
informant.
financial
What are you going to
pipelines
do?
exposed to
Desmond looked
authorities
out his
using
office
the
window
technology.
at the Seattle
Bryant
skyline.
watched this
The gears of his
transformation
mind
with
turning.
quiet satisfaction
Changed the game
from his
entirely.
carefully guarded privacy.
Chapter 3,
While
the
speculation
discovery.
about
Late
Prometheus'
one
creator
evening,
continued
as rain
in
lashed
financial
against
media,
the windows of their
Bryant's
suburban
identity
home,
remained protected
Desmond
by an
sat in his
extensive
darkened
security
office,
apparatus
waiting.
and legal
The house
firewall.
was silent
The
save for the
International
occasional
Monetary
rumble of
Fund
thunder.
is
At
implementing
precisely
Prometheus for
10:42
cross-border
p.m.,
transaction
Valerie's car
monitoring.
pulled into
Franklin
the garage.
reported during
He
his
heard her
monthly
enter,
visit to the
moving
Seattle
quietly
compound.
as if
They're
afraid to
calling it
wake
the
him.
most
Her
significant
heels clicked
advancement
softly on
in
the
financial
hardwood floor as she
transparency
passed his
since the
office door.
creation
The
of
company
modern
had
banking.
overextended,
And the resistance?
investing heavily
Bryant
in improving
asked,
technologies.
knowing the protocol's
They needed
disruptive
Pinnacle's
power had
patents and
created
client
powerful
base to
enemies.
secure their future.
Diminishing,
Exactly
Franklin
why
confirmed.
Desmond had
When the
targeted
Swiss
the
banks
smaller
adopted
company
it last
first.
quarter,
Remington's
the remaining
been using
holdouts
Valerie
lost
to
their
get
primary
information on our
argument
deal.
against implementation.
Theo surmised during
What
their
neither
private
discussed
meeting
openly
at Desmond's
was the
office.
secondary system
Yes.
Bryant had
Desmond's
developed
voice was
alongside
devoid
the
of
public
emotion,
Prometheus protocol,
and she's been a willing
private
informant.
monitoring network
What are you going
that
to
gave
do?
him
Desmond
unprecedented
looked out his
visibility
office
into
window at the
global
Seattle
financial
skyline.
movements,
The gears of
including
his
those
mind
of the
turning.
people who had betrayed
Changed
him.
the game
Through
entirely.
this system,
Chapter
Bryant
3,
tracked the
the
aftermath
discovery.
of his
Late
revenge
one
with clinical
evening,
detachment.
as rain lashed
Frost's
against the
legal
windows
appeals
of
had
their
been
suburban
denied.
home,
His remaining
Desmond
assets
sat in his
seized by
darkened
government
office,
agencies.
waiting.
The
The house
Chinese
was
investors
silent
who had
save
backed
for the
him faced
occasional
their
rumble
own
of
government's
thunder.
retribution
At
for a
precisely
failed operation.
10:42 p.m.,
Meredith had
Valerie's
indeed
car
left the
pulled into
country,
the garage.
using her
He heard her
immunity deal
enter,
to avoid
moving
prosecution,
quietly as
but
if
finding
afraid to
herself
wake him.
essentially
Her heels
stateless.
clicked softly on the
Unwelcome in
hardwood
financial
floor as she
circles
passed his
globally
office
due to
door.
her
The company had
association with Frost
overextended,
crimes.
investing
Bryant's
heavily in
monitoring showed
improving
her working
technologies.
as an English
They needed
teacher in
Pinnacle's
Southeast
patents
Asia.
and
Her
client base
glamorous
to secure
former
their
life
future.
replaced by modest
Exactly why
subsistence.
Desmond
The
had targeted the
completeness of this
smaller company
reversal
first.
should have brought
Remington's
satisfaction,
been using
but
Valerie
Bryant
to get
found only
information on our
hollow
deal.
emptiness when he
Theo
considered his
surmised during their
ex-wife's
private
fate.
meeting
The
at
love he
Desmond's
had once
office.
felt had been
Yes,
completely excised.
Desmond's voice was
replaced not with
devoid of
hatred,
emotion,
but with something
and she's been a
perhaps more
willing
final,
informant.
absolute
What are you going to
indifference.
do?
His
Desmond looked
focus
out his
remained
office
firmly
window
on
at the
Abby
Seattle
and on
skyline,
guiding
the
Prometheus's
gears of his
evolution
mind
from
turning,
behind the scenes.
changed the game
Now
entirely.
11, Abby
Chapter
had
3,
blossomed in their
The
new
Discovery.
life,
Late
excelling
one evening,
academically
as
and
rain
showing
lashed
particular
against the
aptitude
windows
for
of their
mathematics
suburban
and
home,
computer science.
Desmond sat
Like
in his
father,
darkened office,
like daughter,
waiting.
Franklin
The house
observed
was
after
silent
Abby
save
showed
for
him
the
an
occasional
algorithm
rumble
she'd
of thunder.
developed for her science
At precisely
project.
10:42
Brian's life had
p.m.,
found a new
Valerie's car
equilibrium,
pulled into the garage.
structured around
He heard her
Abby's school
enter,
schedule,
moving
his
quietly
remote work
as if
guiding
afraid to wake him.
Prometheus development,
Her heels
and the
clicked
quiet
softly on the
security of their
hardwood
lakeside
floor
home.
as she passed
He
his
dated
office door.
occasionally,
The company had
always carefully
overextended,
vetted women
investing
who never
heavily
learned
in
the full
improving
extent of his work
technologies.
or wealth.
They needed
You
Pinnacle's
deserve
patents and
happiness
client
too,
base to secure
Franklin
their
told
future.
him during one of their
Exactly
chess
why
matches.
Desmond had
not just
targeted the
success.
smaller company
Bryant
first.
moved his knife
Remington's
with
been
deliberate
using
precision.
Valerie to get
I'm
information
happy.
on our deal.
I have Abby.
Theo
Meaningful
surmised
work
during their
and
private
peace.
meeting at
That's
Desmond's
more than
office.
most achieve.
Yes.
The conversation
Desmond's
was interrupted
voice was
by an
devoid
urgent
of
call
emotion,
from Bryant's
and she's
security
been a
chief.
willing informant.
Unauthorized
What are you going to
individuals
do?
had been detected
Desmond looked out
surveilling
his
the
office
perimeter
window
of their
at the
property.
Seattle skyline.
Government.
The gears
Bryant
of his
asked
mind
tersely.
turning.
Negative.
Changed the game
The security
entirely.
chief replied.
Chapter 3.
Initial
The
assessment
discovery.
suggests private
Late
operators.
one evening, as rain
Professional,
lashed
but not
against the
agency
windows
trained.
of their suburban
Bryant
home,
immediately
Desmond sat
initiated
in
their
his darkened
security
office,
protocol,
waiting.
with Abby
The
brought
house
to the
was
house's
silent
secure
save for the
core,
occasional
while
rumble of
surveillance
thunder.
drones
At
deployed to
precisely
identify the
10:42
intruders.
p.m.,
The thermal
Valerie's
imaging
car
showed
pulled into the
3
garage.
individuals
He
in
heard her
tactical
enter,
positions
moving
around the property
quietly
perimeter.
as if afraid to wake
Rather
him.
than calling
Her
local
heels clicked
authorities,
softly on the
Bryant
hardwood
activated
floor
his
as she
private
passed his
security
office
team.
door. The
Former
company had
intelligence operatives who
overextended,
protected
investing
key
heavily
Prometheus
in
personnel.
improving technologies.
Within 20 minutes,
They needed
the
Pinnacle's
intruders had been
patents and
captured
client
and
base to
secured in
secure
a
their
boathouse
future.
at the edge
Exactly
of the
why
property.
Desmond
Their
had
equipment
targeted
and
the smaller
communications
company first.
suggested a
Remington's
sophisticated
been using
private
Valerie
intelligence
to get
operation.
information on our
Who
deal.
hired you?
Theo
Bryant
surmised
demanded,
during their
standing
private
before the
meeting at
restrained
Desmond's
man.
office.
We don't know.
Yes.
The team leader
Desmond's
replied
voice
after
was
calculating
devoid of
his
emotion.
options.
And she's
Cut
been
out
a willing
protocol.
informant.
Payment
What are
through
you going to
anonymous
do?
cryptocurrency.
Desmond looked out his
Ironic.
office window
Bryant
at the
noted
Seattle
coldly.
skyline.
Check their
The
equipment
gears of his
for any
mind turning.
non-standard
Changed the game
modifications.
entirely.
A thorough search
Chapter
revealed
3.
specialized
The discovery.
surveillance technology
Late one
with
evening,
components traced
as rain
to a
lashed
defense
against the
contractor
windows
with
of their
Chinese
suburban
military
home,
connections.
Desmond
The
sat
same
in his
group that had
darkened
backed
office,
Frost's
waiting.
attempted
The
theft
house
of
was
Prometheus.
silent save for
They
the
never
occasional
stopped looking
rumble of
for you.
thunder.
Franklin
At precisely
realized when Bryant
10:42
shared this
p.m.,
information.
Valerie's
The
car
Chinese
pulled into
government
the garage.
still wants the
He
creator
heard her
of
enter,
Prometheus.
moving
They
quietly
won't find
as if
him.
afraid to
Bryant
wake him.
replied with
Her
quiet
heels clicked
confidence.
softly on the
But this
hardwood
means we
floor as she
accelerate the
passed his office
contingency
door.
plan.
The company
The
had
contingency had been
overextended,
prepared
investing
since
heavily
Prometheus
in
first
improving
launched.
technologies.
A complete
They
legal
needed
and
Pinnacle's
digital
patents
separation
and
between
client
Bryant
base to
Novick
secure their
and his
future.
creation.
Exactly
Through a
why
complex
Desmond
series
had
of
targeted the
transactions
smaller company
and legal
first.
structures.
Remington's
Ownership
been
of the
using
Prometheus
Valerie to get
protocol
information
was
on our deal.
irrevocably transferred
Theo
to the
surmised during their
nonprofit
private
foundation,
meeting at
with
Desmond's
Bryant's
office.
contribution
Yes.
anonymized through
Desmond's
multiple
voice
layers
was
of
devoid
protection.
of emotion.
Even if his
And
identity
she's been a
was
willing
discovered,
informant.
no one could
What are you
prove
going
he
to
had
do?
created Prometheus
Desmond looked
or
out his
lay claim
office
to the
window at the
technology.
Seattle
His
skyline.
personal
The
wealth,
gears of his mind
substantial
turning.
but deliberately
Changed the game
kept below
entirely.
levels that would attract
Chapter 3.
attention,
The
was
discovery.
similarly insulated
Late one
through
evening,
trusts and
as
legal
rain
structures
lashed against the
designed to
windows of their
withstand
suburban
any
home,
investigation.
Desmond
What
sat
about
in his
Abby?
darkened office,
Franklin asked.
waiting.
She
The
knows.
house was silent
She
save for
understands
the occasional
operational
rumble of
security
thunder.
better than
At
most
precisely
adults, Bryant
10:42
replied.
p.m.,
But we'll
Valerie's
take additional
car pulled into the
precautions.
garage.
Those
He heard
precautions
her enter,
included a
moving
full security
quietly
audit
as if
of
afraid to
Abby's
wake
digital
him.
footprint,
Her heels clicked
enhanced
softly on the
physical
hardwood
security at her
floor
school,
as she passed
and
his office
contingency
door. The
relocation
company
plans
had
if their current
overextended,
residence was
investing
compromised.
heavily in
2 days
improving
after the security
technologies.
breach,
They needed
Bryant
Pinnacle's
received an
patents and
encrypted
client
message
base
from an
to secure their
unexpected
future.
source.
Exactly
Roland
why
Pierce,
Desmond
a former
had
colleague
targeted
from
the smaller
Silverstream
company
Technologies
first.
who now
Remington's
work for the
been
National
using
Security
Valerie to get
Agency's
information
Cyber
on our
Command.
deal.
Need to meet.
Theo
Matter
surmised during their
concerns your
private
former
meeting
wife
at Desmond's
DF
office.
Urgent.
Yes.
The meeting took place at
Desmond's
a secure
voice was
NSA
devoid
facility
of
outside
emotion,
Seattle.
and she's been
Pierce,
a willing
now
informant.
showing the stress
What are you going
of
to
his
do?
high-pressure position,
Desmond looked out his
briefed Bryant
office
on a
window at the
disturbing
Seattle
development.
skyline.
Frost
The
has
gears
been
of his mind
communicating with
turning.
Chinese
Changed the
intelligence
game
from prison.
entirely.
Pierce
Chapter
explained,
3.
spreading
discovery.
surveillance transcripts
Late one
across
evening,
the table.
as rain
He's
lashed
offering
against the
something called
windows of their
Prometheus
suburban
Zero,
home,
claiming
Desmond
it's the
sat in
original
his darkened
prototype you
office,
developed
waiting.
before the
The
public
house
version.
was silent
Bryant's
save for the
expression
occasional
remained
rumble
neutral,
of thunder.
though
At
internally he
precisely
processed this new
10:42
threat.
p.m.,
Prometheus
Valerie's car
Zero
pulled
doesn't
into the
exist.
garage.
We
He
know
heard
that,
her enter,
Pierce
moving
confirmed.
quietly
But the
as if
Chinese
afraid
are
to wake
interested
him.
enough to have
Her heels
arranged a
clicked
reduced
softly on the
sentence for
hardwood
Frost
floor
through
as she
back
passed
channels.
his office
He's
door.
being
The
released to
company
house
had
arrest next
overextended,
month,
investing
officially
heavily
for
in
health
improving
reasons.
technologies.
And Meredith's
They
involvement.
needed Pinnacle's
She
patents
returned to
and
the
client
U.S.
base
last
to
week,
secure their
Pierce
future.
said,
Exactly
sliding
why
across
Desmond
surveillance
had
photos
targeted
showing
the smaller
Meredith at
company
Los
first.
Angeles International
Remington's Remington's
airport.
been using
Our
Valerie to
intelligence
get information on
suggests
our
she's the
deal.
proposed
Theo
intermediary for
surmised
whatever
during their
Frost
private
is
meeting
planning to
at
sell.
Desmond's office.
Why tell me this?
Yes.
Brian asked
Desmond's
directly,
voice was
what does the
devoid of
NSA
emotion.
want?
And
Pierce
she's been a
leaned
willing
forward.
informant.
Officially,
What are you
nothing.
going to do?
This meeting never
Desmond
happened.
looked out his office
Unofficially,
window at the
we need to
Seattle
know if there's
skyline,
any
the
validity
gears
to
of his
Frost's
mind turning.
claims.
Changed
Could he
the
have
game
accessed
entirely.
early versions of
Chapter
your work
3,
that might be
The
valuable
Discovery.
to foreign actors?
Late one evening,
Brian
as
considered
rain
the
lashed
question
against the
carefully
windows
before
of their
answering.
suburban home,
No, But
Desmond
he's desperate
sat in his
enough to
darkened
construct
office,
an elaborate
waiting.
fiction.
The house was
That's our
silent
assessment
save
as
for the
well.
occasional
Pierce
rumble of
nodded.
thunder.
However,
At precisely
the threat to you and your
10:42
daughter is
p.m.,
very real.
Valerie's car
Frost
pulled into the
blames
garage.
you for everything.
He heard her
and he'll
enter,
soon have
moving
considerably
quietly
more
as if
freedom of
afraid to
movement.
wake him.
After the
Her
meeting,
heels clicked
Bryant
softly on the
initiated
hardwood
the final
floor as
security
she passed his
protocol he
office
had
door.
hoped
The
never
company
to
had
use.
overextended,
Complete digital
investing
and
heavily
physical
in improving
dissociation.
technologies.
Within 48
They needed
hours,
Pinnacle's
he and Abby
patents
would
and client
relocate
base
to a
to
prepared
secure their
fallback
future.
position
Exactly why
impossible
Desmond
to connect
had
to
targeted
Bryant,
the
Novick,
smaller
or
company
Prometheus.
first.
Is this like
Remington's
witness
been
protection?
using Valerie to
Abby
get
asked
information
if they
on our
packed
deal.
essential items.
Theo surmised
Similar,
during their
but
private
better,
meeting
Bryant
at
explained.
Desmond's office.
We're not running
Yes.
away.
Desmond's
We're disappearing
voice
on our
was
terms,
devoid of emotion,
with our resources
and she's been a
intact.
willing informant.
Before leaving,
What are you
Bryant
going to do?
made one final
Desmond looked
arrangement
out his
through
office
secure
window
channels.
at the Seattle
A comprehensive
skyline.
intelligence
The gears of
package
his mind
delivered
turning.
to federal
Changed the
prosecutors
game
detailing
entirely.
Frost's
Chapter
ongoing
3,
criminal
The
activities
Discovery.
and his
Late
connection
one
to
evening,
foreign
as
intelligence
rain lashed
services.
against the
Will
windows
this
of their
be enough to
suburban
stop
home,
him?
Desmond
Franklin
sat
asked
in
when
his
Bryant
darkened
shared the
office,
plan.
waiting.
No,
The house
Bryant
was
replied
silent
honestly,
save for the
but it will
occasional rumble of
distract him
thunder.
long enough for
At
us to
precisely
implement the final
10:42
solution.
p.m.,
The
Valerie's
final
car
solution
pulled into the
wasn't
garage.
merely
He
escape
heard her
or
enter,
protection.
moving
It was the
quietly
complete
as if afraid to
neutralization
wake him.
of the threat
Her heels
Frost
clicked
represented.
softly on the
Bryant
hardwood
had spent
floor as
months
she passed his
developing a
office door.
specialized
The company had
application of Prometheus
overextended,
technology
investing
designed
heavily
to track
in improving
and expose
technologies.
every
They
digital
needed
and
Pinnacle's
financial action
patents and
Frost took
client
upon
base
his
to
release.
secure their future.
26 months
Exactly
after
why
the Father's
Desmond
Day
had
betrayal,
targeted the smaller
Dorian
company
Frost
first.
emerged from federal
Remington's
prison,
been using
ostensibly
Valerie to
for
get
medical
information on our
treatment under
deal.
house arrest.
Theo
That
surmised
same
during
day,
their private
Bryant
meeting
and
at
Abby Novick
Desmond's office.
disappeared completely
Yes.
from their Seattle
Desmond's
compound,
voice was
leaving
devoid
no
of
digital
emotion,
or physical
and she's
trace
been a
of their
willing
destination.
informant.
What
What are you
remained
going to
behind
do?
was an
Desmond
automated
looked out
system
his office
monitoring
window
every
at the
aspect
Seattle
of
skyline.
Frost's
The
communication,
gears of his mind
movement,
turning.
and financial
Changed the
activity.
game
A
entirely.
digital panopticon
Chapter 3,
from which he
The
couldn't
Discovery.
escape. 3
Late
days
one
after
evening,
Frost's release,
as rain
he
lashed
met with
against the
Meredith at a
windows of their
nondescript
suburban
hotel in
home,
Portland.
Desmond
Their
sat in his
conversation,
darkened office,
captured by
waiting.
Bryant's
The
surveillance
house
system,
was silent
revealed
save for the occasional
desperation
rumble of
driving them
thunder.
both.
At
The
precisely
Chinese will pay
10:42
$20 million
p.m.,
for even
Valerie's
partial
car pulled
Prometheus
into the
code,
garage.
Frost
He heard her
insisted.
enter,
We just
moving
need to deliver
quietly
something
as if
convincing
afraid to
enough
wake
to
him.
get payment
Her
up
heels
front.
clicked
There is
softly on
no
the hardwood
Prometheus
floor
zero,
as she passed
Meredith
his office
reminded
door.
him.
The company
It was
had
always a bluff to get
overextended,
you out.
investing
They don't know
heavily
that,
in improving
Frost countered.
technologies.
We
They
create
needed
convincing
Pinnacle's patents
documentation,
and client
deliver
base to secure
encrypted
their
files
future.
that appear legitimate,
Exactly why
and
Desmond
disappear
had
with the
targeted
money
the
before
smaller
they
company
realize
first.
they've been conned.
Remington's been
And
using
Bryant,
Valerie to get
Meredith
information
asked,
on our
he'll
deal.
know instantly
Theo
what we've done.
surmised during their
By then,
private meeting
we'll be
at
beyond
Desmond's
his
office.
reach, Frost
Yes.
promised.
Desmond's
New
voice
identities,
was
new
devoid of
lives
emotion,
in a
and she's been a
non-extradition
willing
country.
informant.
What neither
What are you
realized
going to do?
was that their entire
Desmond looked out his
conversation was
office
being
window
routed
at the
through
Seattle
servers
skyline.
controlled by
The
Bryant's
gears of his
system.
mind
Every
turning.
word parsed
Changed the game
and
entirely.
analyzed. Every
Chapter
plan
3,
countered before
The
it could be
Discovery.
implemented.
Late
When
one
Frost
evening,
contacted
as
his
rain
Chinese
lashed
handlers,
against the windows
the
of their
communication
suburban
was
home,
subtly altered.
Desmond
The
sat
meeting
in his
location
darkened
changed.
office,
The
waiting.
verification
The house was
protocols
silent
manipulated.
save for the
When he
occasional rumble
attempted
of
to
thunder.
create false
At
Prometheus
precisely
documentation,
10:42 p.m.,
invisible markers
Valerie's
were
car
inserted
pulled into the
identifying
garage.
the fraud.
He heard her
From a
enter,
secured
moving
location
quietly
thousands
as
of
if
miles
afraid
away,
to wake him.
Bryant
Her
watched
heels
this
clicked
digital chess
softly on
game
the hardwood
unfold,
floor as she
always
passed
3
his
moves
office
ahead
door.
of his
The company
opponents.
had
Is this
overextended,
revenge or
investing
justice?
heavily in improving
Franklin asked
technologies.
during one of their
They
secure
needed
calls.
Pinnacle's
At this
patents
point,
and client
Bryant
base to
replied,
secure their
the
future.
distinction is
Exactly
academic.
why Desmond
It's
had
survival.
targeted the smaller
30
company
days after
first.
Frost's release,
Remington's been
he and
using
Meredith
Valerie
traveled
to get
Macau
information
for
on
their
our
scheduled
deal.
meeting
Theo
with Chinese
surmised during
technology
their private
ministers.
meeting at
Instead,
Desmond's office.
they were met by
Yes.
internal security
Desmond's
agents who had
voice was
received
devoid of
comprehensive
emotion,
evidence of
and she's
Frost's
been a
attempt
willing
to
informant.
defraud the Chinese
What are you going to
government.
do?
Within
Desmond
hours,
looked out his
both
office
Frost
window
and
at the
Meredith had
Seattle
disappeared
skyline.
into
The
China's
gears of his
opaque
mind
detention
turning.
system,
Changed the
beyond
game
the reach
entirely.
of American authorities
Chapter 3,
or legal
The Discovery.
representation.
Late
Bryant
one
received
evening,
confirmation
as rain
through
lashed,
intelligence
the company company had
that both had been
overextended,
charged with
investing
fraud,
heavily in
attempted
improving
espionage,
technologies,
and crimes
they
against
needed
the
Pinnacle's
Chinese
patents
economic
and client
system.
base to
Charges
secure
that
their
typically
future.
resulted in
Exactly
long
why
sentences
Desmond
at remote
had targeted
prison
the smaller
facilities.
company first.
It's over,
Remington's
Franklin said
been
when the
using
news was
Valerie to
confirmed.
get information
They
on
can
our
never
deal,
threaten you
Theo
or Abby
surmised
again.
during their
Brian's
private
response
meeting
was
at Desmond's
characteristically
office.
measured.
Yes,
It was always going to
Desmond's
end this way for
voice
them.
was
People
devoid
who
of emotion,
survive by
and
betrayal
she's been a willing
eventually run out
informant.
of trust
What are
to
you going to
exploit.
do?
3
Desmond
months
looked
later,
out his
in a
office
villa
window at the
overlooking
Seattle
the
skyline,
Mediterranean,
the gears
Bryant
of his
watched
mind
Abby
turning.
swimming
Changed
in
the
their
game
private
entirely.
cove. Their
Chapter
new
3,
identities were
The
flawless.
Discovery.
Their
Late
security
one evening,
comprehensive
as
but
rain
unobtrusive.
lashed against the
The
windows
fortune
of their
Bryant had
suburban
accumulated
home,
remained
Desmond sat
accessible
in his
through
darkened
structures
office,
impossible
waiting.
to trace
The house was
to either his former or current identity. As the architect of a financial revolution, he could have claimed public recognition and the adulation that would have accompanied it. Instead, he had chosen this quiet exile, protective of the peace he had carved from chaos. That evening, as they watched the sunset from their terrace, Abby asked the question that had been forming in her mind for weeks. Are we ever going back to our real lives? Bryant considered the question carefully. This is our real life now. The people we were before exist only in memories. What about Mom? Abby asked. Will we ever know what happened to her? Bryant had shielded Abby from the full truth about her mother's fate, telling her only that Meredith had chosen to follow Frost overseas. Your mother made choices that took her beyond our reach, he said finally. Some people can't escape the consequences of their actions. Did you love her once? Abby pressed, showing the perceptiveness that sometimes startled even Bryant. Very much, he admitted. But people change, or perhaps show their true selves eventually. Will you ever forgive her? Abby asked, echoing a question she had asked years earlier. Bryant's answer remained unchanged, his voice carrying the same resolute finality. No, Abby. Some betrayals don't get forgiveness. The Mediterranean sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples as they sat in companionable silence. Bryant had lost much, his name, his home, the public recognition for his creation, but he had protected what mattered most. His daughter and the revolutionary technology that would continue transforming the world long after the names Bryant Novick, Meredith Lancaster, and Dorian Frost had been forgotten. The fire he had stolen from the gods now burned brightly across the global financial system, illuminating darknesses that had previously seemed impenetrable. And like the mythological figure whose name he had borrowed, he had accepted exile as the price for his defiance of the established order. Unlike Prometheus, however, Bryant had escaped the eagles sent to devour him. He had turned their hunger against them, ensuring that those who had sought to destroy him were themselves destroyed. It was not forgiveness. It was not mercy. It was perfect, inescapable justice, cold as code and absolute as mathematics. Chapter 9. The Phoenix. 5 years after the Father's Day betrayal, Bryant sat at his desk in their villa study, reviewing the latest Prometheus Foundation report. The protocol now processed over 60% of global financial transactions, its security and efficiency standards having become the industry benchmark. At 16, Abby had grown into a brilliant young woman with her father's analytical mind and a compassion he sometimes envied. Currently attending an elite international school under their new identity, she was already receiving interest from prestigious universities worldwide. Someone sent you a package, Abby announced, entering with a small courier envelope. Biometric verification required. Bryant scanned his thumb on the encoded lock, immediately alert. Few people knew their location, and fewer still had access to such secure delivery methods. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note from Franklin. Thought you should know. Contingency measures advised. The drive contained news reports and classified intelligence about Dorian Frost's death in a Chinese detention facility, officially from natural causes, though the circumstances suggested otherwise. More concerning were records showing Meredith had been released after serving 3 years, her current whereabouts unknown. Problem? Abby asked, noting her father's focused concentration. Nothing immediate, Bryant replied, already implementing additional security protocols through his encrypted system. Just a loose end that needs monitoring. 3 days later, Bryant received an alert that someone had attempted to access an old email account he'd maintained as a honeypot, a digital tripwire designed to detect anyone searching for Bryant Novick. The access originated from Monaco, less than 100 miles from their Mediterranean villa. Coincidence? Franklin asked during their weekly secure call. There are no coincidences in my world, Bryant replied. Implement Shadow Protocol 7. The protocol deployed a sophisticated digital countermeasure. False information strategically placed to suggest Bryant had relocated to New Zealand years earlier. Meanwhile, enhanced physical security discreetly surrounded their Mediterranean compound. 2 weeks passed without incident, leading Bryant to consider whether the threat had been neutralized or diverted. Then, during a routine security sweep, his team discovered a sophisticated listening device hidden in Abby's private sailboat, her 16th birthday gift that she kept moored in the local marina. The discovery triggered immediate evacuation to their secondary safe house in the mountains. As Bryant's security team swept their villa for additional surveillance, he debated the most effective response to this invasion of their sanctuary. We should just disappear again, Abby suggested as they settled into the mountain chalet. We've done it before. Bryant studied his daughter's calm resilience with pride. Running worked when you were younger, but you deserve stability now, friends, school, a normal life. Normal left the building when I was 9. Abby pointed out with a wry smile, so reminiscent of her mother that it momentarily caught Bryant off guard. That evening, Bryant's secure phone rang with an unfamiliar number. After verification protocols, he answered to hear a voice he hadn't expected. "Hello, Bryant," Meredith said softly. "It's been a long time." Bryant signaled his security team to trace the call while maintaining conversation. "How did you find us?" "With great difficulty," she admitted. 5 years in a Chinese prison gives you perspective on what matters. "I needed to see Abby." "That's not possible," Bryant replied flatly. "I've changed," Meredith insisted. "The woman who betrayed you died in that prison. I just want to apologize to our daughter." "Your surveillance devices suggest otherwise," Bryant countered. The listening equipment on her boat wasn't placed by someone seeking reconciliation. A pause. "That wasn't me. I've been watching from a distance, trying to find the right moment to approach. But I'm not the only one looking for you." The security team's signal confirmed the call originated from a hotel in Nice, approximately 50 miles away. Simultaneous surveillance showed a woman matching Meredith's description in the hotel bar. Older, harder, but unmistakably her. "Who else?" Bryant demanded. "Frost had partners you never identified," Meredith explained urgently. "People who invested millions in stealing Prometheus before you exposed him. They blame you for their losses and Frost's death." "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm here telling you instead of hiding," she replied. "And because whatever happened between us, Abby is still my daughter." Bryant ended the call without commitment, immediately enhancing security around the chalet while his team vetted Meredith's claims. Within hours, they had confirmation. Surveillance photos showed 3 known associates of Frost's Chinese backers had arrived in Nice 2 days earlier. A deeper investigation revealed disturbing connections to a private military contractor known for extraction operations and targeted eliminations. "She's telling the truth," Bryant concluded after reviewing the evidence, though her motives remained suspect. Rather than retreating further, Bryant made an unexpected decision. After 5 years of hiding and reactive security, he would eliminate this final threat permanently. "Implement Cerberus," he instructed his security chief, authorizing a protocol developed but never previously activated. Cerberus represented the offensive capability of Bryant's security apparatus, a coordinated operation using digital weapons, financial pressure, and if necessary, physical intervention to neutralize threats at their source. The first phase deployed custom Prometheus analytics to identify the financial structures backing the operation against him. Within hours, the system had mapped the complete network, shell companies, proxies, and ultimately the 3 primary financiers behind the threat. "Chinese military intelligence?" Franklin asked when Bryant shared the findings. "Former officials now operating privately," Bryant clarified, using resources diverted during their government service to pursue personal vendettas. The second phase froze their operational accounts through an untraceable implementation of Prometheus security protocols, stranding their tactical team without resources or support. For the final phase, Bryant did something he had avoided for years. He deliberately revealed his location through controlled channels, creating an irresistible target for the remnants of Frost's network. "You're using yourself as bait," Franklin realized with alarm. "I'm ending this permanently," Bryant corrected. "On my terms, on my territory." 3 days later, as Bryant had calculated, the mercenary team attempted infiltration of the mountain chalet, bypassing the obvious security to approach through the densely forested northern perimeter. They encountered neither Bryant nor Abby, but rather an elite security team specifically positioned based on predictive analysis of their most likely approach. The confrontation was brief, professional, and decisive. By morning, the captured operatives had revealed their complete operational structure under interrogation. Bryant's team methodically documented evidence of the conspiracy against him, creating an intelligence package that would ensure its architects faced international prosecution. "Is Mom really back?" Abby asked as they prepared to return to their villa, the threat neutralized. "Yes," Bryant confirmed. "She claims she wants to apologize to you." "Do you believe her?" Bryant considered the question carefully. "I believe she wants to see you. People rarely change fundamentally," but sometimes they gain perspective. Can I meet her? Abby asked, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. Despite his personal feelings about Meredith, Bryant recognized his daughter's right to form her own judgment, if that's what you want, with appropriate security precautions. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a private dining room in a discreet restaurant in Monaco, surrounded by Bryant's security team. Meredith arrived alone, visibly nervous and significantly changed from the polished socialite who had orchestrated the Father's Day betrayal. Bryant observed remotely as mother and daughter met for the first time in over 5 years. Their conversation began awkwardly, but gradually found rhythm as Meredith explained her actions without excusing them and apologized without expectation of forgiveness. I don't expect to be part of your life again, she told Abby. I just needed you to know that what happened wasn't your fault, and that despite my terrible choices, I never stopped loving you. After 2 hours, Abby emerged emotionally drained, but with a new clarity. She's different, she told Bryant. Broken in some ways, but more real. What do you want to happen now? Bryant asked, prioritizing his daughter's needs above his own feelings. I'd like to see her occasionally, Abby decided. Not as my mother exactly, but as someone from my past who's trying to be better. Bryant nodded, accepting her decision without imposing his own judgment. That can be arranged, with continuing security protocols. Later that evening, Bryant met privately with Meredith at the same restaurant, their first direct conversation in years without Abby present. Thank you, Meredith said simply, for letting me see her, for raising her so well despite everything I did. I didn't do it for you, Bryant replied evenly. I know. Meredith looked down at her hands, the polished manicures of her former life replaced by the utilitarian simplicity of someone who had learned harsh lessons about survival. For what it's worth, I understand now what I threw away. Not just the wealth or comfort, but the family we had. Understanding doesn't change the past, Bryant observed. No, she agreed quietly. Some things can't be undone. But I needed to warn you about the people looking for you, whatever you might think of me. Bryant studied her carefully. Why risk yourself for us after everything? For Abby, Meredith answered without hesitation. And because after 5 years in a Chinese prison watching Frost destroy himself with bitterness and revenge fantasies, I finally understood what you knew all along. Betrayal destroys the betrayer as surely as the betrayed. Bryant didn't offer forgiveness or reconciliation. Those possibilities had died years ago in a lawyer's office on Father's Day. Instead, he provided something more practical. Security arrangements that would protect Meredith from the remaining elements of Frost's network while maintaining controlled contact with Abby. This isn't redemption, he made clear. It's pragmatism. Abby wants this connection, so I'll facilitate it within secure parameters. I understand, Meredith nodded. I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm just grateful for any role in her life, however limited. As they concluded their conversation, Meredith asked one final question. Was it worth it? Creating something revolutionary while knowing it would cost you your identity, your normal life. Bryant considered the profound transformation of his existence, from ambitious developer to betrayed husband to invisible architect of a financial revolution. It wasn't a choice, he answered finally. Prometheus needed to exist, and I was equipped to create it. The cost was high, but the alternative was surrender. 1 month later, Bryant stood on the terrace of their Mediterranean villa, watching Abby skillfully navigate her sailboat across the bay. The threat from Frost's network had been permanently neutralized, their security reconfigured to allow measured freedom while maintaining protection. Franklin joined him, having flown in for their quarterly strategy session on Prometheus's ongoing evolution. The Foundation is proposing a new implementation focusing on climate finance tracking, Franklin reported. The protocol's ability to verify carbon offset transactions could revolutionize environmental markets. Bryant nodded approvingly. Implement it. That's exactly the kind of application I envisioned. And the personal side? Franklin asked carefully. How's Abby handling reconnecting with Meredith? Better than expected, Bryant acknowledged. She's mature enough to understand complex motivations and set her own boundaries. And you? Any second thoughts about allowing Meredith back into your orbit? Bryant shook his head decisively. She's in Abby's orbit, not mine. I'll never trust her again, never forgive the betrayal. But Abby deserves the chance to make her own judgments. As the Mediterranean sun set behind them, Bryant reflected on the path that had brought him here. The blindfold that had once symbolized his deception had ultimately revealed a harsh truth. Loyalty couldn't be assumed, only proven through adversity. The Bryant Novick who had been ambushed on Father's Day years earlier no longer existed, destroyed as thoroughly as his betrayers had intended, though not in the way they had planned. In his place stood someone stronger, more resolute, and ultimately more effective. A man who had created a technology that changed the world while ensuring those who had betrayed him faced the inescapable consequences of their actions. There was a certain symmetry to the outcome. The blindfold had been meant to lead him to destruction, but had instead forced him to see with perfect clarity. The divorce papers designed to strip him of everything had liberated him to build something revolutionary. And the betrayal that should have broken him had instead forged him into something his enemies had fatally underestimated. A man who would never again be blindsided by deception, never again offer trust without absolute verification, and never, under any circumstances, forgive those who had betrayed him. It wasn't a happy ending in the conventional sense, but it was justice, cold, complete, and inescapable, just like Prometheus itself. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.